All right. Hey there, I'm Susie Houston, lifestyle nurse specialist. I work with Vidant Lifestyle Medicine Clinic. And I'm talking about Diabetes 101 survival skills. And we're just going to go ahead and get started. So a couple of things to think about. Think back to when you were first diagnosed with diabetes and what was it that came up at the visit. The thing that diagnoses people with diabetes, it's not just that you one day get the diabetes, it's that it's been working in your body without you even knowing. I feel like diabetes is a sneaky condition, kind of like hypertension. It's like a quiet killer. And so for some, think about in our world, there are people walking around that don't even know that they have diabetes. So there's a big chunk of our population in America that don't know they have diabetes, especially type 2. And so with the diagnosis, the big thing is it's this A1C. And so an A1C is based on hemoglobin. And an A1C, we'll put that there. So a diagnosis for diabetes is based on an A1C or a glucose or the combo. So a glucose or sugar, those are the same. So an A1C greater than 6.5% would be a diagnosis of diabetes. And glucose greater than or equal to 126 if it's fasting. So those are the two kind of numbers that your providers will look at, or if you're ever at a health screening. I know things have changed a lot with COVID, but if there ever was one where you could get your sugar or your A1C done, you should just get it done just to see where you're at. But these would be the magic numbers. 6.5 or greater than 126 is an indicator that your body is not making insulin. And so really, what is diabetes? Diabetes is that your pancreas is not making enough insulin to bring down the sugars in your blood. So your pancreas is an organ that makes insulin, which is a hormone that helps put sugar into the cells that it needs to, instead of floating around in your bloodstream wreaking havoc. So diagnosis is an A1C greater than or equal to 6.5%, and you may not feel it. So if your numbers are up in the 8s or 9s, you still might, if you have type 2 diabetes, you just might know that you have it. So that's where then we got to think about what is the difference between type 1 and type 2. So I drew the numbers up here. Years ago it used to be Roman numeral 2 and Roman numeral 1. Those were the things. Or it used to be called adult onset would be number 2 at diabetes, and number 1 was juvenile diabetes. Well, they've changed that around because now we're finding that children are developing type 2 diabetes, and older adults are developing type 1. So it's really type 1, your pancreas does not work at all. So it's based on that. Pancreas, which remember makes insulin, it is not working. It's kaput. So right away when you find out that you have type 1 diabetes, and usually your body's going to tell you some things, and even for type 2 maybe, but a big percentage in population that get diagnosed with type 2 diabetes didn't think anything of it, didn't think there was anything going wrong or anything going on in their body. And so it was a bit of a surprise. So with type 1, pancreas doesn't work at all, and automatically you would get put on insulin to cover the needs of what your body was doing. And so the way that I remember it, sometimes I would get clients and they would say, "What?" And I'd ask, "Well, what type of diabetes do you have?" And they would say, "I've got the worst one." And then I'd be going, "What's the worst one? Oh my gosh, I have to see it. What's the worst one?" And they weren't sure what they had, but it was the one they had. And it just felt that, "Oh, I've got diabetes. It's got to be bad, and it's got to be the worst." To me, the diabetes educator, I always feel that the worst one is the one that you don't manage or take control over, or that you're in denial. So I have some people that aren't claiming their diabetes. So if you're one of those that's not claiming it, then maybe this little chit chat here that we're having will help you get on board with, because the more you know and the more you understand about how diabetes can go and wreak trouble in your body, then the more it's going to help you to take ownership of what you've got and have good visits with your providers. So type 1, if you thought of that, type 1, a number like that, kind of goes straight down like this. I'm putting a little belly button. That's a belly button. So type 1 used to be that people were kind of this shape. So if I looked in a room of 100 people with diabetes, type 1 and type 2, I could tell more than likely who had type 1 diabetes and who had type 2. So then think of type 2. Here's your belly button for type 2, and it might be, here's your little stomach, there's your waistline. Here's your waistline up here. If you notice, a little bit smaller and a little bit fluffier. So type 2, that would be a good way to remember. If you write the number, type 2, it's kind of more ink you use, so it's a bit wider. So that's meaning, type 2, that your pancreas works some, but it's got something called insulin resistance. So that's something you might have heard from your provider, and it's meaning that your body is making insulin. You've got a pancreas that's working, but it's working really hard, and it's got to get through a layer of FAT. It's got to get through that layer to get to the cells to put the sugar in where it's supposed to go. So if we've got these extra layers, and we got our pancreas, let's just say our pancreas is in here. There's our pancreas in our area. And it's got to get through here because it's trying to get to, we're going to make these our muscle cells because they're locked up tight. And to get things into our muscle cells, we need to have doors. And we don't want just any old thing in our muscle cells, so it's going to have a lock on it. And guess what the key is to open up this muscle cell door to let the sugar in, so it's our fuel, our energy source. Well, it's these little keys. We're going to try that. That's going to be our little key. So that little key's got to go all the way through the fat cells to get over here, and it's going to open this door. And there's our sugar that was floating around in our blood, gets to go into our muscle cells, and the door shuts again. So then we need more insulin. So the more, if we ate or drank something with a lot of carbs in it, so it goes into our body, breaks down, turns into sugar, and starts going out into our blood, our pancreas jumps at attention and starts trying to do its job. Put out insulin keys, put them out, because it's trying to get to all these muscle cells that are all through our body. And if there isn't enough, if those keys can't get over, then the sugar just stays in our blood, and that's where it wreaks havoc and does trouble. So then we've got limited sugar in the cells to give us energy and fuel to move around, things like that. So the more that happens, so the more that our pancreas has to work and the sugar doesn't get in the cells, it gets another signal to say, hey, make some more. It tries to get in, hey, it doesn't get in, make some more. So that's where then with type 2 diabetes, the pancreas can just get so overwhelmed and tired that then the food and activity that your provider might have said to do, like do exercise and go on a diet, and there's a couple of words I don't like. They're like bad 4-letter words. So diet is one of them, because everybody has been on a diet at one point of time in their life, and nobody stays on the same one. Try this, try that, try this. And there is no diabetic diet. So that's a disclaimer for today. No diabetic diet. And so one of our talks later will be on carbohydrates and knowing how to put them together. But I just want to remind you that it's healthy food choices, it's in the amounts that we eat. And if one thing out of this talk related to food and drink choices is if you could make all your drinks 0 carbohydrates, then that's not going to put any added pressure on your body, your pancreas, to try to make insulin to cover a sweet drink. Okay, so that's just one thing. And so as that works, if you working on your food and your activity plan isn't getting your sugar into the muscle cells, then your provider may add a medicine. So it might be one pill to help out. So we'll get to that over with our little guy over there. So with type 1 and type 2, okay, so your pancreas that is making insulin, and when you've got type 2 and you might have a little layer of FAT, makes it harder for that insulin to get over to these, and we're going to call these the muscle cells. So remember, they're from like up here to down to your toes muscle cells. So that means like sugar is floating from head to toe, and the pancreas that's sending out the insulin keys needs to get out there. If it's hard for it to get through the layers, which we'll call insulin resistance, then the poor little pancreas will have to work overtime. And so what happens is diabetes, it's a chronic condition. So chronic, that means that you got it for forever. It's not going away. You can manage it, but it's not going away. So it's chronic and it's progressive. So that means when you were first diagnosed, it can change. So how our pancreas responds, like if we decide we're not going to put down the Pepsi and we're going to keep drinking regular drinks or sweet tea, then our poor little pancreas that's trying its best, this is for type 2, is trying its best to make insulin to cover what you say you get to have because you're an adult and you get to eat or drink whatever you want. And who cares what the pancreas says? Because you won't hear the pancreas till it's too late, okay? He's not going to jump up and jump out of your belly and say, hey, But what'll happen is trouble will happen from head to toe, and that's why it's kind of sneaky and quiet. So you're trying you're trying to do a good job with the food that you're putting in so the poor little pancreas can do its best job ever. So that's us getting started. And if we go back a step, treatment. So if you've been diagnosed with diabetes, type 1 or type 2, there's some things to think about. So at first, so the reason I focus a lot more on type 2 is because 95% of the population has type 2 diabetes. So we're going to just write that in here. So 95% of the people have type 2. And 5%, it's like 5 to 10, but we're going to use 5%, has type 1. Type 1, remember, needs insulin, must take insulin every day. Otherwise, can die very quickly. Type 2 diabetes don't necessarily need insulin, but you do. And so for both type 1 and type 2 treatments, you do need to watch your foods, especially carbs. I'm not saying you have to eliminate them. That's not the idea. The idea is you get to enjoy food and different kinds, but you just need to know which foods and drinks. So we'll put drinks. So you need to be, this is a treatment in a way. So we're not going to call it a diet, but we're going to talk about healthier eating or healthier choices. So that's one part. And the second part would be activity. That was my other bad 4-letter word, exercise, because nobody wants to exercise. Seems like it's a lot of work. But if we just talked about activity, it could be dancing, it could be playing badminton, it could be walking. Walking is the best drug ever. But if you used food and activity as 2 drugs to help manage type 2 diabetes, we're going to underline it, because you still need insulin. So we'll put up here, just so I don't forget, and you don't forget, insulin is needed for type 1. For type 2, food and activity. And the third one may be medicine, medications. Okay, so those are part of the treatment plan to help you out. So making sure, but the top 2, you don't really need a prescription, right? You just need to be on board with it. And with the number 1 and 2 here, food and drinks and counting carbs, or the activity, that's where a lifestyle coach or a dietitian could fit in, or a certified diabetes educators. We're now called diabetes care and education specialists. So if your provider ever brings that up, that, hey, we think that this might be a good idea for you, please be open to that, because we are great resources to help you out, okay? With especially trying to come up with a food plan. Remember, we're not going to use the word diet anymore. And the other word that we should really be paying attention to is diabetic. We really don't want to say, like, I'm a diabetic. I'm a person living with diabetes. We don't use the term I'm hypertension or I'm cancer. So I'm diabetic. If we could start thinking about, because we don't want diabetes to define us, we want to be living our best life ever and then be managing diabetes that we have. So just try to think of it that way, and maybe you'll be more open to the power of what you can do versus what you've been told to do, and be open to thinking more about foods and drink choices and activity. And then if you did need medicine, that's another piece to take on. So I wanted to just do a little demonstration with the A1C, because the higher this number goes, the thing is, some of the symptoms that people get before they're diagnosed, and you can even get these symptoms while you have diabetes, and maybe it's not as managed as well as you would like it to be. So some of the symptoms that people get when they're first diagnosed are they are very thirsty, they are very hungry, so they're eating a lot, they're drinking a lot, and then they're peeing a lot, so their body's trying to get rid of the sugars. Sometimes those people that are peeing a lot, their sugars are high, they're at risk for infections. So they're at risk for urine infections, yeast infections, cuts on their hands or feet or anywhere that aren't healing well, could get blurred vision, and it's because the sugar. So if we looked at, this was our blood, and we've got these little beads in here, and we could pretend those are like little sugar beads. Look at how quick things are moving. And they're getting to the place because insulin's there, and it's able to get in there, open the muscle cell doors to let the sugar in. So that works out really well. And that's when your sugar is between, when we talked over here, where we want our blood sugar to be. So this was diagnosis, and then usually an A1C of 6.5 to 7% is good control and could be a goal for your diabetes plan. And so when you look at it, that means your sugar is going everywhere it needs to go when A1C is in good control with whatever it is you're doing, whether it's medicine or the combination of your food and drink choices with activity. However, complications come on board, and if you can see the sugar in here going through our blood, it's going really slow. And so then this is like a traffic jam. The sugar is just not going to the muscle cells for sure, and then it's getting all sticky and it's hanging on, and it is just causing damage. And so what can happen is it's getting thick through your blood, so it's supposed to be going from your heart down to your feet, up to your brain, and so all those parts in between. And so then that's where people are finding, so if you can see these things are just not moving, that slows everything down. So imagine if, and I'm just jumping over to our little guy over here, imagine if you got a little cut on your toe and you didn't feel it. Well, as soon as we get a cut on our toe or anywhere on our body, it opens the door so germs can get in. And germs, it turns out, love sugar. So if we've got something that's going real slow because our sugar is, we've got an A1C that's 14, which means our blood sugar. So this one, we probably want it, a goal would be 80 to 150, some say, or 80 to 180. But imagine if you had a sugar or glucose 300. Hopefully nobody's got that, but every once in a while somebody could have a sugar that's high, above 200. Things are moving slow, and if we go back to this person with the cut on his toe that he didn't heal so well, he might have got put on antibiotics, but his sugar that's 300 didn't get attention with some medicines like for diabetes to fix and bring the numbers down. So the germs get in there and they hang out and they cause damage, and that's where some people with a complication from diabetes could get infected. They could get put on an antibiotic, but the antibiotic doesn't do its full job because sugars are still high. So as soon as the antibiotic has run its course, we still have sugar moving slow, and even if these were the white blood cells to run down there to fight infection, they're going slow just because everything is slowed down. Antibiotics have cleared, and you thought, oh, I should be good. Well, this poor little toe is still not healed, and it's once again because the sugar is there, and it's like a buffet for germs, so they're going to stay. So the best that can happen is that your blood sugars get in shape, which means you need to call who? Your provider. You need to let them know. They're not magicians at home waiting and thinking something has happened to you and they should call you. So you need to call, speak to the nurse, let them know about your numbers, and make sure that gets squared away. But this is why you will hear that some of the complications, you could say, oh, my granny, she went on insulin and they took her toe. And then they associate that she started insulin and lost her toe. Well, her numbers have been maybe in the 200s, 300s for a good while with her not knowing that she felt bad. And then they figured out that she needed insulin or decided to put it on because at that point there was not really a choice. And so at that time, though, the damage had been done and there had to be an amputation. So with complications, when sugars aren't in good shape, and that's going to be one of our other talks later on in this series for Winning with Diabetes, is going to be talking about the head-to-toe complications. But in a quick nutshell, it can impact everything from head to toe. So high sugars. We got the little toupee, which is really the person's brain up here, so your brain. So we're at high risk for stroke. We're also, if you have diabetes, whether it's controlled or uncontrolled, you're at high risk for depression. And this is important that you let your providers know, because diabetes, right, it doesn't just happen for a minute, you've got it lifelong. And so that means that it can be exhausting. This is a lot of work to hear about, think about, and live. So depression, there could be people have woke up from their stroke or their quadruple bypass and found out that they had diabetes. So you want to make sure that you are taking good care of head to toe health, your vision. That's another issue. It's like a #1 cause for blindness, but it shouldn't be so. So making sure you have your annual checkup. Dental, so anywhere where you have, remember we talked about the toe down here and an opening, germs getting in? So dental work, we want to make sure that we have our teeth checked twice a year and we get a cleaning. If we've got gum disease, that's going to open the door for germs to pop in. They're going to hang out, and if your sugar's up in the 300s, see my little number over here, or it's 200s, or they're too high, not in range where you want them, then that could be causing trouble, and that could head right down to your heart. And people have had a heart infection that was really related to dental care, so watch out for your mouth. Also finding that hearing is another cause or complication with diabetes. So it may be if you're not hearing or you've got your TV turned up that you may want to get your hearing checked, okay? Kidneys, it's making sure once a year you pee in the little cup. That's your provider checking on your kidney function. You even may be on some medicine that helps to make sure that your blood pressure is not too high, which then leads to damage to your kidneys. Your feet, you should be checking them every day. So that's part of, the treatment plan. So we've got food and drinks, paying attention to carbohydrates. We've got activity, trying to get started on a walking program if that works. Some people might not even, and you want to make sure that you check in with your doctor or your provider to make sure that you're safe to start any activity plan. If you haven't walked around the block or you find it hard, then maybe walking, you got to start in the house. So maybe you just start walking more in the house and around. Maybe you do chair exercises. Right now there's loads of videos online, and guess what? One of our topics for this Winning with Diabetes session is on Get Moving. So you'll be able to figure out ways that you could include part of your treatment plan for your own diabetes is your activity goals. The medications, well, that's another one because we've got, and you probably see lots of medicines on TV. So if you do see them on TV, it's just making sure that you write it down. So this is part of you taking care of your treatment plan because it's your personal treatment plan. And you want to make sure you've got yourself a little notebook. Date it and put the things write down your medicines that you've got on so that you know why you're taking what drug and what it's for. And if you do not know, what do you think you should do? You probably need to take it so that you go over it with your provider or the nurse when she goes down to the list. Ask. So if in doubt, make sure you ask. And make sure if you're getting put on a new medicine, make sure you know how it would work, what are the side effects. And another part too is any new drugs. Do you think they are low cost or high cost? So newer drugs, if you're seeing it on the commercials, they're probably going to be on the high cost. So you want to be aware, know this, also talk with your provider, and you have the right to say you can't afford it. If it's expensive, don't grab it from the pharmacy just because that's what your doctor wants you to be on. You need to just let them know. So if you went to the pharmacy and they said it's going to be $250, Mrs. Jones, then you don't have a heart attack while you're there. I can't afford it. But you just say, I'm going to leave it. I'm going to talk with my provider and I'll get back to you, because there will be some other options that you can take advantage of. But your provider needs to know when you leave, they're on to the other patients, and they might not, even remember or thought twice about writing that prescription. Okay, so that's always an important one to be thinking about. So over here, when we've talked about the head to toe complications that will be coming up in another session, is just making sure you know your body better than anyone. And you know that if something is not working right or something needs attention, that you are touching base. So it depends. So if it's something with your mouth, guess what? You probably need to call your dentist. If it's with your hearing, then you maybe need to ask your provider, so your primary care, for a referral to an ear, nose, and throat person or an audiologist to see about hearing aids. But things cost, right? Vision. So I think missed that as we were going through, but it may be time once a year we should get our eyes examined for diabetes complications. And that's where you get your pupils dilated real big and you can barely see if it's a bright sunny day out. You feel like you are blind, but it's really that your pupils have been dilated. But what's going to happen is with vision, you're not going to wake up one day and go, oh my gosh, here goes my eyes, it's the diabetes. It's happening, all these things, problems with diabetes complications, they happen over time. So you might have been diagnosed, 10, 20 years ago. Things are going slow. It's not just, and if you were diagnosed over here, diabetes was working. When you were diagnosed, let's say got diagnosed today.
Well, diabetes started way before that. Things were happening behind the scenes without you even knowing, until, of course, this number popped up and it was like 6.5 or above. Okay? So with your vision, those things were happening over here. Got diagnosed. I've even heard some of my clients say that they were at their eye doctor for their exam and they're saying, "Oh, are you taking your diabetes medicine?" And the person's going, "I don't have diabetes." And the eye doctor is looking in the back of their eyes and seeing complications that are related to diabetes that's been uncontrolled. So that goes back to when I said that there's a huge population out in our world that is walking around like nothing's going wrong and that they're okay. And that's where when people are getting diagnosed, usually what happens is they're not like in the 7s or 8s. They're more like the 12s or 13% A1C. And how their body feels is just think of, remember the way this sugar was moving in here, slow and sluggish? Maybe going to the bathroom more, maybe drinking more, but they're just slow and sluggish. And they think that's the way it is when you just get a couple years older. Like, this must be how it feels like to be 26, feeling old and sluggish. And I'll let you know, though, over the course of my time working with people that have diabetes, I've seen people that have come to me and they've had an A1C that's been in the double digits, been like maybe 12 or 13%. And I can tell they feel crummy, they're tired, they've got no pep in their step. Everything just looks drained. And I wish, and you might want to think about this and even think for yourself how you've lived through your diabetes life, but I wish I could take a picture, because then once they get on the right plan with their foods, they're maybe cutting back off of those sweet drinks, and they're working on activity, but they've also got medications, because when you were a 13 or a 12 A1C, you need medicine, and sometimes you need injectable stuff. But once their A1C goes from a 12% A1C and it gets closer to like the goal, 7% or less, they look like a new person. They almost look like their younger sister. And I know this is going to happen because I've seen it. And it's just, it's such a thing. And then when you don't even realize how bad you felt as a 12% A1C person with diabetes to where you are if you get to goal. So it's some work that's really worth it to get in good shape, because that just helps promote and extend your life and your living. So that's an important piece to stick with these, especially food and drinks, because those are the prescriptions you can write for yourself. So then if we go and talk about, you need medicines, so some might be a pill. Now here's the thing, so we've got medicines that work on, I'm going to just get another color. So there are medicines out there that work on your pancreas. They tell your pancreas, make more insulin, because we need it for the sugar to go into our muscle cells. So there's one kind. There's one that works on, if we had a little stomach in here, so there's the stomach. Some works on the stomach. Some now is working on, so there's a kind of drug. Some works on the kidneys. Some works on the muscle cells. And so there are a bunch of different combinations of medicines. So it turns out that one pill might not cut the mustard to help manage your sugars and get your A1C to 6.5 to 7. So that's where a combination could come along. But here's the thing, we could spend a whole hour, if not longer, going on over all the types of drugs that there is, but we might not even get to the one that you're on. So those are the pill kinds. There's an insulin, of course, that's been around since the 1920s, and it's changed even then, and we've got loads. I could fill this whole board up with all the kinds of insulins. So there's that. And then there's these new injectables that also work on the stomach or gut, on the gut, and it helps for satiety to make you feel full so that you don't eat as much and you give time for the poor little pancreas to do its job. So all those combinations, we've got pills, and we've got, gosh, about at least 10 different categories with the pills kinds. And so if you just came to me, so this is why it's really important to have a list of your medicines, so that, let's say there was a storm brewing in eastern North Carolina and you couldn't get home to your medicines, and I was at the shelter and I was helping with the diabetes medicines, and you came up and you said, "Hey Susie, I need my diabetes pill, a sugar pill." I'd be like, "What? Which one?" And you say, "It's the little white one." I'd be like, "What?" So you want to know what drugs you're on. You also want to make sure that you know how they work and when you should take them. So are we going to go over all the drugs? Nope. I want you to know and write down. You should know all your medicines. And if you ever came to see me for health coaching, I'd be saying, "Hey, what's your medicines?" And if you said, "It's in the computer," I say, "Computer's broke. What have you got? How long have you been taking it? What does it do? What's the dose? So think about that. That'd be in your little diabetes notebook that you could keep. Got your medicines. Also your insulins, if you were on injectables. What kind of it? Injectable. I had a lady the other day and she had called and she's wanting to start a new medicine she saw on TV. So this is where, take a note. She said it sounded like Singulair. Well, Singulair is not a diabetes medicine, so we had no clue what she was asking about. But so there are commercials and they're going to want you to find out about them, but you need to talk that with your provider about it, and just remember about the cost. The other thing that you want to have that's part of your treatment plan, and it's not here, and it starts with an M, I'm going to put it as a number 4, is monitoring. So please don't be one of my people that say, oh, I know how my sugar is, I know how I feel. Because the thing is, some of the symptoms for low sugar and some of the things for high sugars can kind of cross over. So if you thought you were having a low, let's just pretend, a low would be anything below, so less than 70. I like to say 80 because I like a little bit of a buffer. So it's whatever you and your provider talk about. So anything low, it's called sugar. So low sugar, you want to be right on it. You need to have something to fix a low sugar. If you have frequent low, so if you thought you were having a low, what would be something you would do? You would probably go and grab whatever you could find, because your brain does not have sugar for fuel to think properly. So you might be acting kind of crabby or bitchy or snobby or something. You're just not acting right. And the worst thing that could happen, any idea how low your sugar can go? So 0 is as low as it can go. It doesn't go into the negatives. And if you were a 0 sugar, where would you be? You'll be gone. You'll be dead. So 0, anything below 70 is not good. You need to talk with your provider. You need to let them know that the medicine you're taking is too much. Because nobody wants you to keep having a low. Because if you have a low, true low, you've checked it with your meter, your monitor. If you are having true lows, you need to eat or drink something, but quick, fast acting. This would be the time to eat 4 glucose tablets, 3 puff peppermints, those ones that dissolve really quick, half a cup of juice, half a cup regular soda. This is the only time you should be having juice or soda. End of story. It's saving you from going dead. So low sugar, terrible stuff could happen. So you don't want to be driving or working if your numbers are below 70, going to bed. No, it's not a good plan. So, but if you were thinking it was low and you've gone and grabbed something to eat or drink, and really it was 250, because your signals got crossed in your brain. It's over sugared up here. And it's then, this is you thinking, oh, I'm low, eat or drink something. Well, now when you go to check your sugar, it's even higher. So be very mindful about that. If you're feeling in doubt or you're not quite sure or you feel like it's a low, your provider is going to want to know, ooh, when were you having these? How were they a true low, or was it a pretend low, or was your body tricking you? Because then this is part of the partnership. You and your provider are trying to help you come up with your treatment plan, which you're in charge of because you live with it 24/7, and they can adjust the medicines with you, but they need your numbers. So you and your meter for monitoring, you need to get together. And I'll just let you know, diabetes doesn't take a holiday. So the holidays are coming up. We've got COVID that's kind of caused everything to go all wacky on us. Diabetes doesn't care if there's COVID, if you're going to your granny's for your birthday or her birthday, if you are going on a family trip. Diabetes needs to go with you, and you need to remember all of these things, the food, the drinks, activity, the medicines, and your monitor. And you need to bring all that with you, not you get there and you let your sugars go all to Merry Christmas. So low blood sugars are important to recognize. That's a conversation with you and your provider, but you have to do the legwork. So that's the monitoring. And you know, right nowadays we've got the continuous glucose monitor, which you maybe see on TV commercials, and there's Freestyle Libre and Dexcom that are available. And that all depends on your insurance. So that's something to check out with, again, I say your provider, because that's who's going to write the prescription for this, and it may be doable with your insurance plan. It's the same with the monitor. If you go to the pharmacy and they're saying it's like $80 for the test strip, you want to just be double checking to see that you're on the one that your coverage says you should be on. So different coverage plans have different monitors that are available. So make sure that you're on the one that will cover you, okay? And so let's see. So we've covered the foods and drinks, covered the medicines, the meters, the continuous glucose monitor. So that would alert an alarm, and you could look at it. It's a little device, or it could be on your phone, and it would tell you where you're going. And instead of, like, if you checked your sugar 1 or 2 times a day, the continuous glucose monitor would have up to 288 readings, and it would have a little graph of how things have gone through the day. So with type 1 or type 2, you need a treatment management plan, a self-management plan. You need to be thinking of foods and drinks, activity, medications, and monitoring. You need to think about, do I need some guidance or help with an educator on my team? Because of depression and things like that, behavioral changes, it might be a counselor could be helpful. Dietitian is also very helpful, and those diabetes care and education specialists are really important because they can help you figure out where some areas that you might need some improving on. So I hope that helps you with getting started with Diabetes 101 survival skills. It's making sure you go regularly to see your provider, and that's usually 3 to 4 times a year, depending on what you guys have decided, and making sure you are checking your feet, going to the podiatrist if you need to, making sure your kidneys get checked once a year, making sure your lipids are getting checked, that's the cholesterol levels, and making sure you hit the dentist twice a year, and your vision once a year. And those are just things to help you stay on track with your diabetes plan. Thank you.